Are you ready? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lunch with Leaders. We are a nonprofit, educational, advocacy group of men and women that care about improving the quality of life in our community. And through that, we believe that if citizens are educated about the issues and the candidates, that they can make better choices. I thank you very much for joining us today. And today we have a special guest in addition to our panel. We'll get to the panel in just a moment. But Foster Campbell is a special guest of ours. He's a public service commissioner who has fought intensely for a issue that he wants to bring before you. He's asked for special time. Foster, come on up. Let's welcome Foster with a nice round of applause.
Thank you, Gene. I appreciate it. I was in town yesterday, and I felt y'all having a meeting, and I applaud you for doing this with League of Women Voters. It's good because okay, Leaders with Vision, that's better. How's that for recovery? Okay. Well, anyway, I appreciate very much being here. What I want to talk to you about that I've been working on is prison phone systems in Louisiana. There's a real disparity there that these every jail has a different phone. And some of these phones are astronomical. The prices are astronomical. And I did that at the Public Service Commission, knowing that majority of my commissioners wouldn't be for it because they're afraid of the sheriffs. The sheriffs run the jail, and they get the money from the prison phones. And I've been so bold to call it a scam, which I really think it is a scam. You realize that some of these particular jails, commissioner paid as much as 70 cents at Angola. The commission is 70 cents. In other words, if somebody spends $10 on a phone call at Angola, the state of Louisiana gets $7. It's outrageous. You and I talk for about a penny a minute. If you're in jail, it's about 30 cents a minute. And they put these fees on these jailhouse phone calls. I don't know if you know it. If you make a phone call from the jail, and the provider, whoever the provider is, and there's many different providers, there's no, we don't try to get the cheapest phones for the people to talk to their families. We get the one that's most expensive because they make the most commission. Let me tell you what happens. If you want to talk to someone in jail, you're working out here, you have a young man or a young woman you like to talk to, and or they have a parent or kids or whatever, they put up $50, they charge them a $10 origination fee, you're down to 40. And then, if that's for one phone call, one phone number, if Judge, you and your wife are trying to help somebody and you give them your phone number, your wife wants to get on, that's another $5. So you're down to $35 right off the bat. Now, if you only talk $20 in the month and you want to get your $15 back, they charge you $10 to get your $15 back. And then if there's any money left on the table, they keep it. It's the damnedest thing I've seen. Instead of encouraging rehabilitation, we're letting people take advantage of the poorest of the poor. 90% of these people in jail incarcerated are indigent. And I'm not taking up for the prisoners. It's not about the prisoners. This is about the prisoners' families. 40,000 people out there trying to talk to their kids. Now, I know that if you want to talk to your family, that's got to help rehabilitation. And when we put these kind of fees on them, it's outrageous. And I've been trying my best to take it off at the Public Service Commission, and I hadn't had a lot of help. Nobody wants to take on the sheriffs because the sheriffs are the political power in the various parishes. When I did this, everybody said, well, that's going to get you beat. But let me tell you what happened. I just ran for re-election in 24 parishes in North Louisiana, and we won 23 of them. I'm a Democrat, and everybody said, well, you can't run as a white Democrat anymore, you got to be a Republican. Well, I got 61%, with Republicans, Democrats, and all. I think it's time for people in Louisiana, politicians, to stand up and do the right thing. And when you do the right thing, it takes care of itself. So what is a sickening thing here in Louisiana, you got to realize this now, that you have more people incarcerated than any place on the planet per capita. Not in Louisiana, on the planet. More than Cuba, more than North Korea, more than Red China. Right here in Louisiana. And something's not going right. Something's not going right. We got to do something about prison reform. We got to do something. It's a big, big part of our budget, and we really need to look into this to see if we can get a handle on it, where we don't need everybody in Louisiana, that many people in the penitentiary. Some parishes have 50% of the people in jail who've never been tried. Never been tried. So, I mean, we got a problem. And when we punish people who want to talk to their loved ones on the outside by letting these people come in these jails and charge these astronomical fees, that's contradicting all the common sense approaches to communication and rehabilitation. So if you see any of your commissioners, try to talk to them and say, look, get on the side of the people. Don't worry about the political fallout. You'll make it if you'll just do the right thing. Thank you so much for letting me come today. Okay.
Thank you, Foster, because you set the tone for what we're here to discuss. You know, I phrase this as, is there equality in the criminal justice system? And a good friend of mine questioned the title, because as she said, if there's not equality, there is no justice. And we're here to talk about some of the challenges we face. We cannot afford the loss of that much human resources just being stacked up and warehoused. We need to get people rehabilitated. We need to deal with our challenges, not stick our head in the sand. And that's why we pulled together this august panel of academians and practitioners to help you get a grasp from all points of view, and so that you will walk out of here more knowledgeable than you came in, and you can talk to your neighbors and your friends. This also will be posted about a week from now up on the website, so you can tell your friends you missed it, but you can go here and watch it, okay? We do encourage you to still keep coming so we can keep doing this, okay? Don't just go to the television set. But anyhow, our first spokesman is Dr. Lori Martin. She's the Associate Professor of Sociology and African American Studies at LSU. We do not give bios. We give you the paper. You read it. Here's Lori Martin.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share my perspective on the topic. As you know, we as professors can have a tendency to be long-winded, so I'm prepared my remarks so that I'll stay within the time frame. Racism, as defined by Dr. Hayward Derrick Horton, is a multi-level and multi-dimensional system whereby minority groups are oppressed and scapegoated by the dominant group. Claims that America has become a post-racial society, notwithstanding, manifestations of racism are all around us, including in the state of Louisiana. Louisiana is home to some of the poorest and the least educated citizens in the nation. The state is also the site of one of the country's most notorious prisons, Angola, a former and present penal plantation where 76% of inmates are black. Louisiana's history in leasing convicts, a disproportionate number of whom were black, for plantation labor in the 1800s is well known. In more contemporary times, according to a recent report in the Times-Picayune, in New Orleans, 1 in 14 black men is doing time. 1 in 7 also either on probation or parole or in prison. The ACLU, in a 2014 report prepared for the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, found that blacks are overrepresented among prisoners serving life sentences without the possibility of parole, and disparities are particularly great in some states like Louisiana. The proportion of blacks serving life without the possibility of parole is 73%. ACLU also found that black prisoners comprised about 91% of the nonviolent life without parole prison population in Louisiana. Blacks in Louisiana are 23 times more likely to be sentenced to life without parole than whites for a nonviolent crime. Research, including research I conducted with my colleagues Fashion Varner, Quinn, and Jackson, show linkages between mass incarceration, the exploitation of the black body, the miseducation of black youth, as well as the persistent racial economic inequality in Louisiana and in U.S. society as a whole. Research also reveals the presence and persistence of privileges which flow between institutions such as education, the economy, and the law, which involve capitalizing on the misery of blacks. The civil rights movement represented a commitment on the part of individuals and organizations to American ideals of democracy, equality, justice, fairness, and prosperity. Yet overt manifestations of racism were soon replaced with more covert tactics, and the law remained a powerful tool used to control large segments of the black population and other communities of color. Alexander highlights the impact of the war on drugs on the mass incarceration of young black males in the new Jim Crow. Drug policies and other law enforcement tactics serve much of the same function as race-specific policies and codes during the enslavement era, argues Alexander. The number of black men who are apprehended, prosecuted, sentenced, and punished by the criminal justice system is far too great. The incarceration of hundreds of thousands of Americans since the 1970s, a disproportionate number of whom are black or brown, provides some of the best evidence of the continuing significance of race. Given that race is a foundational, socially, and politically contested construct, ridding social institutions, including the criminal justice system, of racism will not happen overnight. It may not happen in a generation. However, it is critical that we continue to address the myth that we're living in a post-racial society by drawing attention to efforts to capitalize on the misfortune of racial minority groups. Misfortunes that are the direct and indirect consequences of historic and contemporary public policies and private practices. It is only when we recognize the continued unequal treatment of people of color in our society that we can do something meaningful to bring about a more equitable, a more just, and a more fair society. Otherwise, we will continue to bequeath to the next generation a world more unjust than the one in which we inherited. Thank you.
Next on our program is Leslie Taylor Grover. She's the Associate Professor of the School of Public Administration and the Nelson Mandela School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs at Southern University. Would you please welcome Leslie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your invitation this afternoon. Dr. Martin has already given you a great introduction to some of the research that's out there. So I want to talk about some of the policies behind why we find a lot of these things in the research trends, and then offer a few policy recommendations in terms of how we can begin to address some of the things that we're going to talk about here today. First of all, the notion of disparity is what is keeping Louisiana impoverished. Through my research with Drs. Price and Horrent, what I found and what we found is that the more disparity there is in a state, the greater the chronic poverty. In states like Louisiana, we can look at disparity in white versus black, or white versus brown, or by race, because for Louisiana, race is a proxy for well-being. In terms of private prisons here in Louisiana does incarcerate the most people in the universe, as it was already said earlier, but one of the reasons behind that is a perceived economic benefit. Out of all the places that have private prisons, Louisiana is the only state that breaks even. The other states lose money. Louisiana breaks even. Sometimes politically speaking, breaking even is considered a profit. But any of you who understand what breaking even means, it means you're not gaining or you're not losing. So that's one of the things that drives Louisiana's disparity. Another thing has to do with the nature of inequality and disparity itself. The work of Massey, who took a look at racial disparity, including that of mass incarceration, brings a great point. And that is, regardless of your economic system, regardless of your level of poverty, inequality predates systems. So when we look at the effects of private prisons or a capitalist economy or a socialist economy or whatever type of economy that floats your boat or finds your lost remote, what we find is that the social regulations and the social environment in which these economies and prisons happen is actually what drives inequality. Regarding the civil rights movement, one of the things that was a failure of the civil rights movement was after the freedoms and the civil rights were granted, there was not a plan put in place to talk about sharing of power among the races, giving up power, granting power. Now, in theory, and the things that I sometimes work on with my colleagues, it sounds very simple. But the reality of it is, people who hold power are not just necessarily going to say, oh yes, take my power and I'm going to be taxed higher and spend more money so you, as a black person or brown person or incarcerated person, can enjoy a good quality of life. That's not going to happen. In fact, in rare instances when it has happened, there's something called statistical discrimination. And that means that while you may not be able to discriminate against me because I'm black, there are things associated with my black experience that can be used to discriminate against in other ways. And that could run the gamut from educational levels to prior convictions to even geographically speaking. So with that said, I want to take my last few minutes to talk about policy recommendations that can be used to address some of the issues that we're going to discuss here today. The first is the decriminalization of marijuana. Notice I did not say the legalization of marijuana, the decriminalization. That means the heavy fines, the sentencing, the jail time is decriminalized, it's reduced or gotten rid of altogether. I realize here that in this state it may not be, feasible right now for it to be legalized, though the numbers do indicate that most citizens are moving towards that. The second thing is improving the quality of public education and truly making education equal and fair, because education is the key that breaks the equality lock. And lastly is public engagement. There's so many people who have been disenfranchised, whether or not they serve time or whether they're poor or whether they're a member of a particular ethnic group. So any community level efforts to re-engage people, to make awareness a thing, to talk about taking part in community will also help to address those notions of disparity that you're going to hear more about today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And now we have from the Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Scotro couldn't personally be here today, but he sent his ace, Rodney Walker, Captain Rodney Walker, who will address the Sheriff's contribution in BRAVE. Rodney?
Good afternoon. Before I get started, I just have to say that I was a little leery about coming here today because I know with all the negative coverage we've gotten in law enforcement over the last few months, I was a little worried about my safety. So I'm asking y'all to be nice. One thing that I want to talk about is I've been doing this job for 25 years, and I want to say that law enforcement, we hadn't always gotten it right. I want to say that up front. We've made some mistakes. I want to tell you that. But one thing that we've done, the Sheriff's Office has tried to do is to build relationships. And you cannot build relationships by riding in your car for hours. You have to get out and meet people where they are. At one point, a person became a case number. We met people through incidences, cases. That's how we met. So in order for us to break down this disconnect, in which we have it, we have to go to the people where they are. And I can tell you one thing that the Sheriff's Office has done is we've gotten out of the cars, we've gone to the neighborhoods, we've gone to the schools, we're going to the businesses, and we're asking people, what can we do to better serve you? What can we do to bridge this gap between law enforcement and citizens? And one of those groups that we had to make contact with was the young black male. And we would go out to schools and we would say, okay, tell us why you dislike us so much. And trust me, these young guys, they didn't spare our feelings. They cared nothing about our feelings. They told us exactly why they disliked us. Well, you stop us because we're just hanging out. You stopped us because we're black. And I'm like, oh, I'm black too. You stopped us because of this. You stopped us because of that. And what we're trying to do is to make them more aware of, even though you may not think that loud music is a problem, you may not think that hanging out is a problem, but it is a problem. It may be minor to you, and just because you don't like a rule or a regulation, you have to abide by it. And another thing that we're trying to do is to teach them to be more aware of how to deal with interactions with law enforcement. If a law enforcement officer asks you to put your hands up, put your hands up. If they ask you to stop, just stop. If they ask you, if you have to ask you to get on the ground, get on the ground. There'll be time for complaints later, but at least you're alive and you're well. But many of the young people, they get so upset because I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right. It's not about being fair. It's not about being right. It's about the rules and regulations. And I'll give you an example. I was patrolling a high crime area. There was an apartment complex, and y'all tell me if y'all hear anything wrong that I did. There was 4 guys hanging out at an apartment complex, and there's no loitering signs, no trespassing signs everywhere. And these 4 guys were actually hanging out right underneath the sign that said no loitering, no trespassing. So I waited a while to make sure these guys were not just talking. I think I'll move on and give them a few minutes just to congregate. So I waited about 3 minutes. It's okay, they're hanging out. So I walked up to the guys and said, hey guys, y'all can't hang out. Management has complained, you have to move on. So 3 of the guys, they got up, they walked off. The last guy, he just stood there. I said, you can't hang here, you have to move on. He looks at me up and down, he says, I don't like the police. I said, what? He said, I don't like the police. Now, I wasn't always saved, y'all. I wasn't. So I said, boy, if you don't get up and exit this area, there's going to be some serious business going on. And he got up. But as he walked off, he would mumble some words, profanity. Now, for many officers, that's a threat. He has a threatened stance, disobedient, not compliant. But this is how we tell the youth to not get in situations. Just obey the rules. Now, if I was an officer that wasn't confident, then I could have probably sprayed him with my mace, may have pulled my club out, may have tased it, because he initially disobeyed an order. So we're telling you to disobey and not get yourself in situations. It's about being educated. How many, and I don't want to use college as a means to escape some of the conversation, but how many college grads have you seen being shot, not obeying law enforcement officers? If you think about Baltimore and Wisconsin, and I'm not pointing the finger, I'm just saying, when you're educated and you're aware, you make better decisions. All you have to do is just obey the order. I know my time is running out, so I know y'all have many more questions, and I'm getting the time that I'm running out. I'm talking too much, so I have 30 seconds? Okay. Well, I'll save some of my comments because I can go on and on. I'm really appreciative for you all having this conversation, because we can't continue to run from this sensitive conversation. We need to have it. So thank you all for bringing us together, and I'm excited about any questions you all may have. Thank you.
And now there is someone that I'd like to introduce who's here in spirit, but because of his workload, he can't be here, and his name is Mike Mitchell, and he's head of the public defender's office. Now, folks, things are getting pretty bad down there. We were talking about justice and what you could do. Last year, the public defender's office handled 22,000 cases with 40 attorneys. This year with the cutbacks, I don't have the stats, but I do know that they are in status quo, and very shortly here, they're not going to be able to take any more cases. And then what are we going to do? We're going to leave them in the jail because they haven't been adjudicated yet. We have a serious problem. Call your legislators and tell them we need funding for the public defender's office. And if you want to know, Rodney opened the door to people be involved. Government cannot do for you. If you think government can solve all your problems, then you better take a look at what they did to the American Indian. Take that to heart. We citizens have to get in and get involved. So with that statement, I'm going to go to the next phase of criminal justice, and that is the reentry program. And that I introduced James Wyndham, who's the executive director of the Capital Area Reentry Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you all for inviting me here. When I look at the panel here, I'm always amazed, and I always feel like a novice when I speak before you all, because I've only been doing this for a very short period of time. I spent about 29 years working for Exxon before I began my illustrious career in this reentry field. But one of the things that I want to talk about is what Gene just indicated, or at least intimated, and that is getting involved. Because like so many people, I went to work every day, went to vacation, went to church, and did the Christian thing by not getting in trouble, and therefore I thought I was doing my American duty. And so whenever I would see anything on television that sounded like reentry, crime, or whatever, I would flip the channel and do like most Americans and ignore the issue. That changed. Now, I'm not going to give you a philosophical or biblical or spiritual edict, but I will say this. Once you begin to recognize that you're not in this world just to suck up the air and to eat and go on wonderful vacations, you begin to realize that your energy is supposed to be spent not just for yourself, but for someone else. And that's why I got involved. And as I've often said, I just wanted to help a few people. And look where I am today. And that's not an indication of how great I am, but how great He is who sent me. Now, having said that, I'm encouraging you to really consider what reentry is all about. Reentry is about what happens after all of these other people have said things that they've said, and these people that we're talking about have gone to jail and they need services. Now, Capital Area Coalition is all about providing those tools that will provide a successful opportunity for these individuals who are returning from incarceration to live the kind of life that God intended. Now, what that means is if they've had substance abuse issues, marital problems, employment issues, educational issues, we help to provide that by canvassing the neighborhood, finding partners who will work with us to provide those tools for those individuals. Now, there's about 17,000 people coming out of incarceration every year. Now, right now, within the Exxon complex, there's about 5,000 people working, bringing in wonderful wages, and which is contributing to our economy. Can you imagine just 50% of those 17,000 people doing the same thing, how much of a difference it would make in our economy? Now, so one of the things I'm asking is not only to ask you to get involved, and I'll tell you how you can do that later, but I'm also asking you to have a paradigm shift, because right now, as long as it's about those other people, you'll never do what you need to do to contribute to making I love what Gene was saying earlier today, making us proud of being in Louisiana, making us proud of being Baton Rougeans. Why is it that we always seem to go someplace else to find out how they are doing it when we could do it right here? Common sense is not just common sense across the border. Common sense is right here. Common sense means that every person that works produces an income, pays their rent, pays their taxes, makes it successful for everyone. We should be striving every day to make sure that the Jamal, LaQuisha that comes out of incarceration has every opportunity to provide their families with the things that we all want. So why aren't we involved? Well, I'll tell you how you can get involved. One of the things we can do is be a mentor. What is a mentor? A mentor is just a person who lives a life before someone. What kind of life? A great life. Everyone that we have engaged in our office have told us this. I wish someone would have told me this. I wish someone would have showed this to me. Everybody wants to have a good life. One of the things that we celebrate in Capital Area Ranger Coalition is this: the innate desire within each person in this room, including everyone in this state, to live a life of success, influence, and impact. Can you imagine the kind of impact a person would have to provide if you decided to live your life before them? One other thing. Why not, now we could talk about the issues. We know about the Jim Crow book, and we know about some of the issues that surround reentry. But I grew up in a neighborhood, my great aunt who reared me said this: boy, if you know a man don't like you, why you give him the gun and the shells? And what she was meaning was, if I drop out of school and do stupid stuff, then stuff happens. So if I don't want stuff to happen, then it makes sense to do what? Stay in school and do the things necessary so that I can live the life God intended without hiccups, speed bumps. That doesn't mean that it's going to be easier. It just means that I have to make what? Different choices. Now, we can do that on the front end. How do we do it on the front end? We talk about education. We need to not only talk to the children, but we need to talk to the parents. Because unfortunately, a lot of the people that we're talking to are coming out of broken homes. We can change it if we get involved. Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you.
Now, our dear judge, who wanted to be the cleanup batter, okay? Practically everybody in this room knows Bob Downing. He needs no introduction. Welcome, Bob Downing.
Well, if you go in any high-crime neighborhood, you see no loitering on all the businesses. Therefore, no loitering signs causes crime, right? So if we passed a law that you couldn't have no loitering on the businesses, that would reduce crime, right?
It's wrong. Wow.
It's not logical, right? But that's basically what the other argument is. We need to fix the system because we have too many of a certain race in it. Is it the system that's broken? If you look at the statistics and you take the race off the statistics, what you find is, and this is what I did the first year that I got on criminal court. I didn't want to be on criminal court. I wanted to be on civil court. Never did any criminal work except 2 cases, which a friend of mine who did criminal work said, "Would you stop doing criminal work? You're messing up the law." What are the factors? The failure to achieve literacy by the 3rd or 4th grade makes the likelihood of future incarceration 20 times more likely than other students. Children raised in single-parent homes are less supervised, which leads to less emphasis on education and self-determination. That's what I found. I would look at bond files and it would list dropped out of school in the 9th or 10th grade, no father at home, religion, Baptist or Catholic, no pastor, no priest. You didn't get any Episcopalians or Presbyterians. They all do federal time, as you know. The recidivism rate in most states is 7 out of 10 within 3 years of release. But in Louisiana, we're doing a better job. It's less than 50%, which is a significant savings. And it is doing so because of reentry programs, education. Judge Hal Ware, who was tough on crime and lock him up and throw away the key guy, got into machine shopping as a hobby. He goes hand over and teaches inmates how to do machine shop now that he's retired. And he started doing it before he retired. Our Department of Corrections, from their website, did a study that shows that when offenders are involved in effective prison ministry, the percentage of those rearrested drops dramatically from 41% to 14%. And among those, if a person attended 10 or more Bible studies during his incarceration, he is 67% less likely to return to prison than those who did not. That is pretty dramatic. So if you have a father at home, you attend church, synagogue, a mosque, whatever, you generally will not go to prison. Now let's talk about our school systems. Do they teach English, math, any differently in a poor school, in a poor neighborhood, than they do in a better neighborhood?
Yep.
Do they? No, they don't. They don't. You have same teachers. They move teachers around. My kids went to Buchanan, McKinley Public School. My son went to CSAL, which was a charter school that is near Scenic and Choctaw. You all know where Scenic and Choctaw is. Not very many people drive around that neighborhood, but it's a nice neighborhood. You don't have much crime in there. But people don't normally drive around there. So, the people who have children that generally end up in the criminal justice system have less than 3 books in their house. Now, when did your mama start reading to you? Right, right. My mama read to me before I was born. When she was pregnant, she was reading to me. I can't remember a time when my mother didn't read to me. And that is common with people who are successful. We had a lot of books in our house. I read all the time. I volunteer to read for VIPs. I've been doing it like 12 years, volunteers in public school. I read to a first grader, different first grader every year. And they're usually behind in school. They get the attention they don't get at home. Do we have any other VIPs volunteers in here? Just happen to know he was a VIPs volunteer. Yeah, he's retired from Southern. We need more VIPs volunteers. You can make a difference and you can keep somebody out of prison, and that saves approximately $30,000 a year. It's the best investment you can make. Thank you, Jean.
One of the things that, when we look at this, is first of all, we have to remember, and our big chorus song when we were working with women's prisons, we're all in this world together. And we have to remember that. It's not those people, or they're different than I am. It's all of us are in this world together, and it's up to us to look to solve the problems. Don't expect big government, like Henry Ford said, and I said earlier, if you think the big government can solve all your problems, you better take a look at what they did to the American Indians. Having said that, we'll start taking questions from the audience. That's Native Americans. I mean, I give up on that. I'm an indigenous American Indian. Okay, that really hits me close to home. Okay, does anybody have a question? Yes, please, Clyde.
I usually don't stand to speak, and I don't have a question. I want men, Captain Walker, for all of you guys. Thank you.
Oh, by the way, the next time you're in a coffee shop or having lunch or something, see an officer walk in, you might think about picking up his lunch tab. It's certainly, I've done that, and you cannot believe it was nothing compared to the satisfaction I got from it. Looking at the smile on their face. Anybody else have a question? I can't believe y'all are this quiet. Okay, Merritt.
3 or 4 weeks ago, I attended an activity at LSU. They called it the award ceremony for the ROTC system. I do not know if it was both Southern and LSU, or just LSU, but it was such a fine group of young men and women, black and white, that you would have been very, very proud. And as best I could tell, the press was not there. And if ROTC was good enough for Russell Honoré, Colin Powell, it's good enough for everybody. And
Question? Your question.
why does the press and the university refuse to emphasize ROTC?
Okay, I'm afraid that's going to go to the academic people here. I know you're not in charge of administration. Give it a shot.
So I'm of course not speaking on behalf of LSU or Southern, but one thing that I would say is that I agree with you that ROTC and the other organizations and programs on campus that involve our students are doing many positive things. We have many students, male and female, black and white, and other groups who are doing wonderful things that don't oftentimes get the credit that they deserve. And sometimes some sociologists in particular might argue it's because it runs counter to a dominant narrative. So if you're trying to paint a particular picture about an entire group of people, then you exclude those stories that don't fit into that narrative. So we as consumers, I would argue, should demand more of the press, and so that we should encourage them to profile more positive stories about what's going on, whether that's interactions with law enforcement or whether it's individuals in ROTC or it's the 4 black males that I witnessed graduate with their PhDs in the School of Education on the same day. So we as consumers have to demand more from our media. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question? Okay, then you, Okay.
I'm going to be good today. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Alfreda Tillman Desmond. I'm General Counsel for the Louisiana State Conference of the NAACP. All of you were wonderful. I just want to say thank you to all of you for your time. Most of you I know, at least a bit. But I want to say Judge Downing made excellent points about the home and the contribution of the home and how we have to teach our children. I have a young son whom I had that talk with and told him about obeying the officer and just make it home, baby. Mama will make it right. But, you know, it's good when you have that, but a lot of our children don't have that. So it is the responsibility of all of us to be a part of the village, to raise all of the children. And you know, like most people, we don't have a bunch of time, but we do what we can. But my question is, with law enforcement, you talked about the children responding and obeying the officer. But the challenge that I'm trying to make this in the form of a question, but the challenge that many of us have is that not all of the officers are respectful of the community, not just the children, but the adults as well. And I guess my question to you would be, just as we want to be responsible for the children and the people in the community, how can the officers be more responsible for the other officers who actually disrespect, disregard, and abuse the community?
Yes, great question. We have to be held accountable. I can tell you from training for years, if I see an officer not treating someone fairly, it's not going to take the sheriff or the news media or anybody else to correct it. I'll correct it then. And a lot of officers, we're human, and we don't know everything. I want to say that. We're not experts in everything. And so when you see something like that, and I'll give you an example. I trained this young rookie guy, and we work in high crime areas. And so he saw 4 guys riding the vehicle. And we're a certain group, okay, we do traffic enforcement, drugs, pretty much everything. So this young rookie guy, he sees 4 guys riding in the vehicle. He says, I'm going to stop that car. I said, okay, where are you going to stop them for? I see 4 black guys riding in a car. I said, okay, what are you going to stop them for? They look suspicious. 4 guys riding, black guys in a car. I said, how do they look suspicious? They just look suspicious. You will not stop that car because you have no reason to stop that car. So we have to train our guys to know that just because that's a stereotype, 4 black guys in a car, what is your reason? Give me a solid reason. Now, if we don't train them early, then they'll do things like that and not knowing, thinking that they're doing something good. I understand we want to take drugs off the street, guns off the street, and make it safe, but you will do it right, and you will be held accountable. So right now we're going through extensive training, diversity training, and so things like that are going to help. And again, we're not perfect, but if you see it, you are held accountable if you do not do something then. Don't wait till it escalates and becomes a national media thing. If you see it, and you don't do anything about it, you're just as guilty. So I can promise you, if I see it, we'll stop them right
there. Just 1 second, 1 second. I want to follow up something that Alfreda said. What kind of community do we live in where a mother has to tell her child, just make it home and mama will make it right? We don't feel that way on South Baton Rouge. Why should they in North Baton Rouge? We as a society, as whole of Baton Rouge, need to stand up and say, enough. This should be a community for all of our children and all of our citizens. Now, she wants to ask you a question.
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if the diversity trainings is linked to that. I'm not sure. But we have many more trainings that's coming because of the national attention and knowing that, we all, as law enforcement, we come from different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds. We've had different experiences. We've been exposed. Myself, I'm from New Orleans, and I've seen different sides of, law enforcement, crime, and I have family members that's doing time in jail for murder and drugs and different things. So I've seen both sides. So a person like me, I'm a little more familiar with the culture in high crime or poverty areas, opposed to someone who hadn't been exposed to it. It takes a little more training. So we're trying to train people of all walks of life to just be familiar with the basics of how to deal with different cultural differences. And I think once we realize that we are different, and that's okay, but treat everybody like you want to be treated, like you would treat your mother, your brother, your sister, then I think everything will be okay. But the training, we're having it, but I'm not sure about that particular training that you mentioned. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, Ike?
Yeah.
Okay, Ike has a question.
I guess probably the best person to think about this question might be Judge Downing, and I want to congratulate you, sir, on being one. When Mr. Campbell was here a while ago, we talked about how the phone calls, and a few minutes ago he talked about how the phone calls kind of get in the way of rehabilitation and cost families a whole lot of money. Another thing that I think really has a very disparate impact on a lot of prisoners and their families is the fact that so many people after incarceration don't find the ability to be able to have their voting rights restored. Okay? What I wanted to do, and I tried, but we got a cowardly legislature, I'll be honest with you, is try to have some legislature or sponsor legislation that would essentially say that any part of your sentence was plea bargain, then you really don't lose your right to vote. Okay? I would think that another way to get that accomplished, because Louisiana, the legislature again has no backbone, would be if forward-thinking judges had it specifically as part of their sentencing order. Okay? That's not included.
There's a question.
And I'm asking, do you think that that would fly? Do you think if judges started doing that, that would work? Do you think there'd be enough consensus among judges to try to do something like that? In other words, I'm sentencing you, but this sentence does not include revocation of your voting privileges because this was a plea bargain. You're going to jail, no doubt about it, but this was a plea bargain.
Bob needs to
I retired so that eliminated all the forward-thinking judges. But the right to vote's not something a judge can do. But there's a first offender pardon if it's their first felony. Then when they finish their sentence, they're supposed to automatically get their right to vote back. It's the first felony. Problem is, people who aren't felons don't vote. That's a problem. Right now, Baton Rouge City Court, there's a dispute over the city of Baton Rouge is majority black. So there's a dispute over having it citywide, which means that every judge could be black, right? Well, the other side wants to have districts. A group of black legislators wants to have districts because they're saying the black turnout is low, and so they wouldn't be able to elect as many black judges. So what? Well, black people don't turn out to vote in the same percentage as white turnout. White people will come out and vote, and black people won't. So what you're saying is black people won't turn out to vote for black people. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So we need districts to elect black judges because our people won't turn out to vote for black judges. Now that is sad. That is sad. And another statistic is if it rains, white people will vote in the rain and black people won't. There's a significant drop-off if it rains, and white politicians know that. It's a shame. But here's a tip. Mamas, periodically, your son's going out somewhere, go out in the driveway, get them to do the brake lights, make sure your brake lights work, make sure both tail lights work, make sure your headlights work, make sure your directional signals work. The lights on the license plate, you don't even know they're there. Make sure they both are burning. And the little plate the kids like to put around the license plate, if it is covering anything, that little sticker at the bottom, if it's covering anything, get rid of it. Gotta leave anything out? Anything like that, then they'll have probable cause. There's 4 black guys in that car. Oh, but the lights out at the license plate. Oh, that frame. All they need is one little probable cause, go over the line a little bit, and they can stop the car. And it also helps if they don't have marijuana and drugs in the car, and especially if you don't pass a cigarette with your fingers like this and do this. People pass a cigarette and a joint 2 different ways, and I can tell when the guy in front of me is passing a joint, passing a cigarette. Okay. Yeah. But little tips like that. And if you see one of your neighbors without a headlight or tail light, you know, tell them about it, because most people don't know that their tail light's not working. Might help them.
Well, I have a question to ask all of you. Now, Albert, let me get this one out, okay? And then I promise I'll come back to you. We've talked about theory and statistics and lots of people. But how do you take a young person and how do you motivate them to go get a minimum wage job when the guy next door is making thousands selling drugs? I'd like to hear all of y'all weigh in on this, because you can theorize all you want. Well, let's get down on the street. What's the answer? How can we change that environment? Because everything starts at home. Rodney, what goes down?
I tell you, just like today, it always starts with a discussion. It always starts, the discussion gets the ball rolling, and I'm going to tell you why I say that. Oftentimes, I'll go to different schools, I talk to kids, and also I'll listen to kids and hear their conversations. I went to one particular school, I'm not going to name the schools, I went to a particular high school in the northern part of Paris, and I just walked around during lunchtime and during the breaks and listened to what they were talking about. This particular school, the kids were talking about, I'm going to get the new Jordan tennis shoes, I'm going to the latest rap concert, I'm talking about rap songs, and I'm talking about hustling and making money. And so I said, okay, that's the basic conversation. I go to another school, southern part of Paris, high school, and the kids are talking about what college you're going to attend, what's your major going to be, what type of after-school programs you're going to be involved in. And so I really thought about it. I thought about that and I said, it all begins with a conversation. You become what you talk about. You become what you think about. So if all you're talking about, even parents, if all you're talking about at home is negative, low productive things, and that's all they hear, then in the real world, they're not going to have a positive mindset. And you go across town somewhere else and they're talking about being successful, improving, learning things, then they're going in that direction. And so oftentimes, I think Judge or somebody mentioned about reading books. You learn from reading, you learn from discussions, and so if we change what we talk about at home, then we change our lives. So change your discussion, you can change your life.
Wanted to comment. I thank everyone for their thoughtful questions and comments, and just wanted to chime in to say that I think it's really important to focus on these individual micro level issues and talk about what kids are saying and how they're feeling. But I think it's also important too to put it in a much larger context and to think about it from a historical perspective. And so when we talk about issues of education and we talk about economic inequality, these things, especially race disparities, don't exist simply because one group does not want to be successful and that they don't want to have or attain the American dream or they lack motivation, but there's a reality that there have been public policies in place, and we can list them, that have created certain advantages for some groups and created disadvantages for others. So for example, it's not a coincidence that North Baton Rouge is predominantly black and South Baton Rouge is not. I'm from New York, and so I don't know the history as well as you all do, but it's quite clear to me, especially if you see some of the GIS maps that show where different groups are living. It's almost as if, in the words of the chair of our department, Dr. Shahade, who shared the map with us originally, that it looks like there was a fence along Florida Boulevard. And so if you look back at the role of the Federal Housing Administration, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, the system of redlining that kept millions of people out of enjoying the single largest mass accumulation of wealth, it's not a coincidence that you have racial and economic disparities in contemporary times. And children of color, parents of color, they want their students to be successful as well. But it's not a coincidence that they're overrepresented among schools that have been deemed failing, that have inadequate teachers, and that there's been a disappearance of educators of color, and that schools are closing, and that there's a myth of what I call school school choice. So we can talk about all the things that we can do as individuals, and we should try to do everything that's within our control, but we should not, and I'm not accusing anyone of doing this, but just want to make it clear that we also have to understand that there are forces beyond the control of our young people, beyond all the control even of individuals in this room, that we must also take into consideration as we try to move forward.
Dr. Sanders. I owe you one. My colleague and I, we've done a couple of studies using an equality index, where basically what we do is compare good things in life to bad things in life, and we do it based on race, sometimes we do it based on gender, sometimes we do it based on age. To answer your question, what we found is that and all schools here are not equal. They're not teaching the same things. They don't have the same resources. They don't have the same access to all the capital, public capital and social capital. But let's say that they did, and everybody was equal. We would have $19 billion more in revenue in this state than we do now, just from education. $19 billion. And how much is the shortfall that we're talking about? Well, we keep 1.6. That's right. I think that those billions would cover that.
Yeah.
Don't you?
I think so.
All right. I'm not a statistician, but my math says that. Another thing that we found, just dealing with business activity, because there's been a lot of talk in the news about these tax credits being given away and trying to get people to come to the state. But that started in the 1920s, towards the end of the Great Depression, and y'all got that from Mississippi.
Yeah.
I'm from Mississippi, and y'all got that from us, and even though none of us were here in that time, probably, I'd like to apologize because we've taken it too far.
Yeah.
So when we talk about business activity, there is a huge disparity between the activity of white-owned businesses versus Asian-owned businesses versus black-owned businesses versus brown businesses. If all of those have access to the same loans, resources, and angel network capital were available, that would be an additional $25 billion. And that's not to really say a lot. I mean, I keep putting emphasis on the B in billion, but Louisiana is not a poor state by any stretch of the imagination. Our gross domestic product was 3 times that it is a nation. We have billions of dollars that come through here in tourism every year. So the issue is not, oh, Louisiana's a poor state. Louisiana is a state that suffers from inequality and disparity. And it doesn't matter how much revenue you have, as long as you have that, those little billions of dollars, they won't make a difference as long as the disparity is here. And that's what we see happening.
Leslie, to follow up on that, first of all, the citizens of Louisiana have to take back their legislature. You got to get out and vote, and you have got to look at the legislators. This fall, there's a lot of term-limited people. They're flipping. They're going what house they're in. They're going to the other house. Just because you recognize a name doesn't mean it's good. Start examining their track records if they're up for election, and find somebody who will vote for your best interest and the interest of your community, your block, okay? It's up to you. You have to make the difference. You've got to get out and vote, and you've got to do some homework. You know, I'm going to go back, and everybody knows that the last campaign that we witnessed, we saw 14,000 commercials from one candidate who said one word, never told us what he was going to do. Well, when you get tired of doing that, you'll take your government back, and not until. You have a question, Maxine?
Actually, I don't have a question. I hear a gap in the conversation, but it's not a gap totally. It just hasn't been pulled together yet. And I like what Dr. Martin said by indicating that there are circumstances involved with what we think of as young African American people who tend to be seen as a problem. I heard the police officer say, the sheriff deputy say about police make mistakes and they're human too. And I rarely hear people say young black men are human too and they make mistakes too. I like hearing that. I also hear a lot of applause when people say the parents need to do things, you need to tell your kids this, and the if is in front of it. And I always hear the word if as if being operative. Because if it isn't happening, then the rest doesn't matter. Because the if is there. So when you have to say if, you can just not say the rest. What we do in Dialogue on Race Louisiana is we help people see the connection between the individual and the institution, always together, never separate. And sometimes it concerns me when I hear the conversation separate, when I hear, if people did this with the kids, and if the kids did that. You're talking to 40 people in the room here. So it's not going far enough. We don't change our society by getting everyone to do the same thing and to do the right thing. So I'm going to use an example. Our streets. We don't ask people to be courteous at intersections where they used to get out and fist fight. We put up traffic lights, institutional change. We don't ask people to stay in their lane. We draw the lanes for them to see which ones to stay in. We don't ask people to figure out what the speed limit is on the road. We put it up for them. Institutional change does more for behavior than trying to convince parents how to teach their kids, and trying to teach kids how to react with the police officers, or trying to train police officers how to react with the kids. We need to do some institutional changes that you and I here shouldn't have to figure out by ourselves, because we have great minds in those positions who can figure these things out. Let those with the expertise, and by our calling for it, because this is a we the people country, state and city, and it's we the people who determine what kind of country we want, what kind of state and city we want. And we need to put the people in place who can, by election, whatever, who can do those things that would change those things in our institutions to make everything work better, and a way to gain those billions and recognize. You think there are people who don't know about these billions that's missing that you're describing? They know. But we have to be the ones who show the will to have this happen. And yet, we're saying parents need to do this, they do. It's good to tell your kids what to do, right? Officers need to be trained to do this, they do. But we need to also think about what we're asking officers to do. Why are we asking them to arrest? Why are we asking them to look for suspicious looking black men in the car? Who's asking them that? All of that needs to be a part of it. No one needs to just be pointing their fingers at individuals. We need to ask what institutional changes we need to make things look better. And a lot of the attitudes will follow. Just like when we took smoking out of public places, attitudes follow. Even people who smoke don't mind going outside to smoke anymore. Much institutional change has great attitudes that follow.
Thank you.
I want to close on one thought, and this is a suggestion, and if anybody has any comment on it, I'd like to hear it. But there is a system that is used by politics. Now, I don't want politics, and I don't want partisan politics to take a hold of it. But like Chicago and New York, they have ward bosses, and I'm saying, you know, we call North Baton Rouge a food desert. Well, how about each block is a little island? Why couldn't we get people together as a block, let them elect someone who would be, say, a Kiwanis or a Rotary, or Leaders with Vision would adopt a block, and they would provide information and resources to them, which they would share with their block. This is called the bootstrap up, rather than sit there and say, well, that's in North Baton Rouge. But keep the partisan politics out of it. This is talking about giving the power back to the people. What do you think, Rodney?
Right. Well, anytime you direct a person to do for themselves, I think is always good. Nobody really wants anybody from the outside to come in and tell you how to run your household. So it's always good to empower. But my question is, I mean, really, I'll ask the question, how do we do that? How do we motivate people to do that when there's so much red tape to get to certain points? There's so many things that we have to overcome, politics and so many stipulations. So how do we motivate people to do it that's sustainable? I mean, we can get folks motivated today and we go out and do something today and tomorrow, but what about the long-term thing? It's very difficult to motivate people long-term, and it's a great idea, but
Actually, you're talking about a block meeting once every couple of weeks where they bring information back and then start developing progress for projects.
Right, well, let me tell you why I say it's difficult, because we go out through communities throughout Baton Rouge and we try to get block neighborhood watch groups together, and it's extremely difficult. It's kind of on the same line as information sharing, problem solving techniques, coming together, bringing things together, working collectively. But again, we've had difficult times of bringing those little small pockets together. So I appreciate the vision, but again, I'm still at the point where how can we motivate to do something that's sustainable?
Every journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, and we have to find a way. We don't look at the barricades, we look at the goal. And with that, I'm going to, one commercial. I'm sorry? Yes, please. Well, maybe we start with reaching out to them and finding how they did it, and then implement it here to our community. But there is an answer. You don't look at the roadblocks, you look at the goal. Yes. Now, Leaders with Vision is pleased to host the 20th annual Reality Check Luncheon. It is the first legislative review. It will be held 18 hours after the legislature closes at Ralph and Kaku's restaurant. Everybody knows where that is, over in Bluebonnet, okay? Our speakers, we have an outstanding list of speakers. We have Jeremy Alford of the Louisiana Political Facts Weekly. You see his columns in the newspaper all the time. Dr. Albert Samuels will be here. You're the head of the Political Science Department, is that correct?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, I've been here.
You've been anointed, okay. He's been anointed out of Southern. Robert Travis Scott, President of the Public Affairs Research Council. You all see him in the paper all the time. Butch Spear, who is the clerk of the House of Representatives. He got his hands into it all the time, okay? And Elliot Stonecipher. And again, they will have 8 minutes apiece to give their viewpoint, and then again, we will have questions and answers. This one is a fundraiser for Leaders with Vision, and it is $40. It must be prepaid. We have to guarantee it 72 hours in advance. So if you're interested, grab one of these sheets. If there's any extra sheets, take them to your office, share them with everybody, because what they did and did not do, you should know about it, because everybody should see a bullet coming. See you all in August for our next Lunch with Leaders, and thank you so much for being engaged citizens.